Honourable Swart.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you for the presentations. I would like to start with the South African Council of Churches and thank you for the church that is arising and the voice that is arising in society. And I commend you and I encourage you to not listen to any people that should say that the church has not got a voice. Our courts have upheld that, and it is a critical time for the church in South Africa and believers, myself as a believer, for you to start speaking out at this time, because we know that corruption affects us all deeply and affects the poor of the poor. And so I want to thank you for the strong stance you've taken. When I engaged in the presidential budget vote, I read from Habakkuk. Bishop, you read from Habakkuk. I read a scripture about plundering and looting that is taking place and how the nation cries out then. The nation is crying out now. How much longer will it continue? And I believe today we start to address the issues of justice and in righteousness. And I want to commend, Chairperson, you and the committee, that this is the beginning of a process of accountability of justice and righteousness in our nation that is starting today. And myself, as a long-serving member of Parliament, commit myself to this process. I serve on the Justice Committee. We know that justice and righteousness is the throne, is the cornerstone of the throne of God. And so it is key for us today to start holding people accountable and say enough is enough. We had 1 million people that prayed together in Bloemfontein for godly intervention. And what we see today, you being here, is an answer to prayers. And I would encourage believers throughout and anyone, citizens in South Africa, to start writing to this committee with submissions. Chair, I'm sure we'll discuss that later, but it's a key part. But what I wanted to ask you, as you pray and as you take action in elevating the situation and elevating the evidence, yes, you have indicated that some of the whistleblowers have given evidence, but the additional aspect that you bring is the levels, and this might not be a focus of this portfolio committee, but for me as a parliamentarian, it's important, is the degree of corruption at provincial and local government level as well. And so we need as MPs to have that information, and whilst it is given to you in a confidential setting as clergymen, I would urge you to encourage those people as well to come forward and to lay charges and to take a stance for justice and righteousness. I ask you, where to? Where are you taking the process further? You've been here. I would urge you to monitor this process as well as the church. Like Nathan the prophet monitored what King David did and held him accountable. The church voice is very important at this stage. So if you could respond to that, where to from now, from the church's side, beyond the report, beyond your engagement with the public protector, but particularly on this Eskom issue. OUTA, I'd like to also commend you for the work that you've done. The affidavit that you have furnished, and that was on the website where you laid the charges, is crucial for us, because when we start engaging in this process, it will be done under oath. Witnesses that will come here will give evidence under oath. So what you've already said, I saw last night the affidavit that you filed in the lodging of your criminal actions with all the annexures. That has weight. It has a lot of weight. And so I would ask you also to monitor this process and assist us with, and particularly Mr. Blom, with the expert evidence that you've got having served at Eskom. We're going to need that evidence, and hopefully, Chair, we can engage your expertise and other experts from OUTA as we go forward. But what was particularly concerning to me was that issue of that, firstly, 2 issues which you raised, and that was this hidden checkbook or someone who's got the golden key. I'd like you to further explain that. How is that possible, where you've got IT, you've got SAP processes that you said are very robust? How is it possible that these funds seem to be going and being diverted corruptly? Secondly, the issue of that guarantee. I was startled when I heard the admission made at the Eskom financial statements of this guarantee. I've never, as a lawyer and with an economic background, I've never heard of anything like that. where a state-owned enterprise gives a guarantee for one company to buy another company. But as Mr. Gordon says, we are connecting the dots now. We are connecting the dots. So all this information, Chair, as we're going forward, will be put to witnesses called. And it's going to be very interesting to see how they respond. But I'd like you as well just to unpack that a little more, because obviously as you connect the dots, you can see the 2.1 billion that was required to purchase the Optimum mines, and then the coal that was moved across is very suspect. It's in the public domain. But again, I want to ask you, you've now laid criminal action, you've laid criminal charges, but if, as is suspected, that even our law enforcement agencies, as Mr. Chipkin pointed out, are captured themselves, we are doing this inquiry. But my greatest concern, and as I've raised it already with the Deputy President, and my leader, Reverend Meshwe, raised it with President Zuma, there is nothing to prevent criminal prosecution taking place now. There is compelling evidence. And so whilst we are going forward with this process, we know funds are leaving the country at an alarming rate. You've laid charges. What's the next step going to be? Should you find that your charges are not being investigated, would you, like PRASA, was forced to take the Hawks and the NPA to court after 2 years of non-investigation? Mr. Chipkin, thank you for your presentation, your academic research. And again, as a long-standing member of Parliament, I'm alarmed. I've never heard of anything like this situation. And whilst we've suspected that, we've read your reports, we've seen the reports, but the fact that we've got our whole constitutional democracy is under threat by a shadow state, that what you state and what you allege, that even the majority party, the ANC, has been sidelined, must be a great concern to every citizen in South Africa. And so I want to thank you as well for your presentation, that it's not only focused on a no-confidence debate in President Zuma on the 8th of August, that it goes far deeper than that. And it's time for every right-thinking and South African and that wants justice and righteousness to prevail to take a stand now. So I want to commend civil society for this. And I wanted to just ask you to unpack more the evidence that you've garnered in your research, and what are you going to do with that evidence? Yes, you've asked us, and we'll be engaging as parliamentarians, but you, in your own right, at the end of the day, we've still got the rule of law. We've still got independent courts. Are you going to further litigate in any way to ensure that this looting and corruption comes to an end? Thank you, Chairperson.